I've made updates to most of my lighthouses. First, we're going to look at the Graves Ledge Lighthouse. I upgraded the granite blocks so that they're actually the correct color. Earlier they were brown, but the lighthouse is actually gray in real life. I also added smooth shading so that the lighthouse actually appears to be round and not squarish. I don't know why they don't smooth shade round objects by default in Blender. That would make things so much easier. I made a more detailed texture for the door from scratch, as well as a more detailed texture for the windows. The window textures are also a lot more reflective. I also made the solar panel textures more reflective as well, and I added detail to the granite textures. The metal textures now actually look like they're made of metal, and all the round sections have been smooth shaded. I made the lens more reflective as well. I tried to make the beams of light transparent, just like they, I guess, would be in real life, but unfortunately this game doesn't understand the idea of glow in the dark and transparent at the same time. Generally, if it glows in the dark, it's also opaque. The glass textures are now more reflective too, and the lens reflects the light just like it would in real life. I also made the transition between the top of the tower and the bottom of the lantern room more curved, just like it would be in real life. Oh yeah, as mentioned earlier, there's also an auxiliary light version of this lighthouse. The auxiliary light turns on whenever the main light stops working. On this one, it's mounted on the ceiling inside the lantern room, and it flashes with the same characteristic as the rotating light. I also made a version of both lighthouses with or without the foghorn, and all four versions are seasonal. Seasonal, by the way, means that in the wintertime they will collect snow. So far, the only lighthouses that I have on the download station that I haven't updated yet are the Cape Henry lighthouses. The main thing stopping me from updating this is that I don't know the fog signal characteristic of this lighthouse. I found a lot of articles that tell you that it has a fog signal, but none of them tell you the fog signal characteristic. So far, the only thing I know is that the fog signal is programmed that if a ship approaches the lighthouse and calls it on a radio, it'll automatically sound the foghorn, and that's the only time when the foghorn will come on. The lighthouse will also simultaneously send out a radio beacon. The ship will use this to pinpoint its location by comparing the time it takes for the sound from the foghorn to reach it and the time it takes for the radio beacon to reach it. But I still can't find anything that tells you the characteristic of the fog signal, i.e. how often the fog signal sounds and for how long. It also took me a really long time to find out the flash characteristic of this lighthouse, because on the US Coast Guard website it just says 20-second flash cycle, but it doesn't give you any other information about what specifically it does when it flashes. I found out from a random Facebook video that the lighthouse flashes with 2 quick flashes followed by a 7-second flash, and it does this every 20 seconds. So yeah, it is a 20-second flash cycle, but a little bit of information was missing from there. I also found out recently that some of the glass panes in the lantern room are red. This is so that if a ship is facing the lighthouse from a certain direction, they'll see a red light instead of a white light. And this is so they'll know that they are traveling in the wrong direction, and if they continue to travel in that direction, they're going to hit some rocks. They need to turn their ship until they see a white light instead of a red light. Every single lighthouse I make for this game that has a fog signal in real life, I try to program that into the lighthouse in this game as well. So that's the main thing that's stopping me from updating this one. Anyway, this is the Deer Island Lighthouse located near Boston, Massachusetts. I made the metallic textures actually look like they're made of metal this time. Again, back then I was a little bit confused with how the parameter textures worked, so I made mistakes with trying to make metallic textures, and a lot of times they ended up looking like they were made of wood or something. This update fixes that. I also made the lens textures for the light more reflective, I made the solar panels more reflective, and I added smooth shading so that all the round parts of the lighthouse actually look like they're round and not made out of individual square shapes. For the longest time, I couldn't even figure out why you would want to shade a round object flat, but then one day I noticed when looking at a streetlight pole that some streetlight poles actually are not shaded smooth in real life. So that is one situation where you'd want to shade something flat when making a streetlight pole, because they actually don't look completely round when light shines on them. This lighthouse has a red and white light that alternate every 10 seconds at night. An alternating light is basically a light that changes color. Red lights are usually set aside for really dangerous locations on lighthouses. If you see a red light coming from a lighthouse, you're going the wrong way. And of course, there's also a fog signal version. This is an update I made to the Jeffries Hook Lighthouse, also known as the Little Red Lighthouse. This lighthouse is located under the George Washington Bridge in New York City. Hold on, I'm checking on the Long Island Head Lighthouse real quick to see if an update to the game fixed an issue I was having with it. You see, this game has a glitch where objects that glow in the dark can shine through objects that are opaque for some reason. It's really annoying. And for this specific lighthouse, the light which is hidden inside the lighthouse when it's off so that you won't see it is actually visible through the walls, and it's only in this lighthouse that I've been having this problem. However, it looks like that problem has been fixed. The problem shows up better in complete darkness. Hold on, let me get just close enough that you can see the light. Okay, it looks like they might have fixed that problem by now. While we're here, here's some edits I made to the Long Island Head Lighthouse. I gave it more detailed brick textures. I made a new texture for the door from scratch. I made the windows more reflective, and the roof as well. I'm not sure, but I think the roof is supposed to be made of metal. I added smooth shading so that the round objects would actually appear round. I made the solar panel more reflective, which is still ironic to me. Like, it feels weird that something that's supposed to absorb sunlight also is quite reflective when you shine light on it. So that's kind of weird. Probably to prevent it from overheating. Anyway, I made the lens textures more reflective, as you can see. This is the auxiliary light that's mounted outside of the lighthouse, which comes on in case the main light fails. And here is the Jeffries Hook Lighthouse. I updated the metallic textures to make it look like it was made of metal, because it's supposed to be a cast iron lighthouse, but earlier I made mistakes with the parameter textures and it ended up looking like it was made of plastic. I made the glass textures more reflective. I also added smooth shading so that the lighthouse actually looks like it's round. And this is actually the only lighthouse that I made an interior for. The light can actually shine through the glass and you'll actually see the light shining inside the lighthouse. I didn't add stairs though because that would have been way too many polygons. I made the metallic textures more reflective, and I also made the lens texture more reflective as well. The Jeffries Hook Lighthouse used to guide barges in the Hudson River, but when the George Washington Bridge was built above it, sailors were like, okay, we don't really need this lighthouse anymore because the bridge is tall and we can see it very clearly, so we don't actually need the lighthouse to pinpoint our location, and the bridge also glows in the dark, so we don't really need the light from the lighthouse either, so they just took it out of service. But they put it back in service, and now it's a tourist attraction. So far, this is the only lighthouse I know of that's located under a bridge. Their flash characteristics are almost identical, but the Jeffries Hook Lighthouse has a red light, while the Long Island Head Lighthouse has a white light. This game has a weird glitch where whenever water is visible behind a glass texture, the glass texture disappears. I think that glitch happens because this game doesn't understand what to do when a transparent texture is behind another transparent texture, and the water is also transparent, so that confuses it. This is the auxiliary light version of the Long Island Head Lighthouse. As you can see, I made the light texture more detailed, and it's more reflective as well. Unfortunately though, when you zoom out far away from the lighthouse, you can see the light inside the lighting apparatus because, like I said earlier, in this game, glow-in-the-dark textures can shine through opaque objects. It's kind of annoying, but there's no real way around that. The US Coast Guard actually took this lighthouse out of service, but then they quickly changed their mind and put it back in service. Typical US government, they tend to be a bit undecisive about things, don't they? Yeah, unfortunately the auxiliary light doesn't work too well because you can see it even when it's off because the object it's hiding behind is opaque, but the light is just shining through it. There's not much of a way around that in this game, unfortunately. I mean, there would be a way if I could program the light to be hidden from the game, like literally deleted when it's off, but that would require some scripting that I'm not sure how to do yet. In general, how I make flashing lights in this game is I simply hide the light texture behind something when it's off so that you won't see it. But I've been having issues with that with this specific lighthouse. This is the Prices Creek Front Range Lighthouse, an abandoned lighthouse located in North Carolina. This update adds a lot of detail to the brick textures because back when I made this lighthouse, I only knew how to make brick textures of one color, but the bricks of this lighthouse are of varying colors because they're very aged. After all, the lighthouse is abandoned. I recently found out how to make brick textures of varying colors, and that's what I'm doing for this update. I also add some more detail to the bricks as well. And I think I already learned about smooth shading by the time I made this lighthouse, so I didn't have to worry about that. By the way, a quick public service announcement. Do not visit abandoned buildings because it is dangerous. Someone tried to visit this lighthouse a while back and he tried to climb to the top of the staircase, but unfortunately, because the stairs were made of wood and they had been rotting, the stairs gave way underneath him and he fell to his death. So please be really careful about the idea of visiting abandoned structures. It is not safe. And now for the St. Augustine Lighthouse. Since this is one of the first lighthouses I made, it had to be redone from the ground up. This update properly aligns the black and white stripes as they should be. It also adds detailed brick textures to the black and white stripes, something I didn't really know how to do back then. The roof of the lighthouse, oil house actually looks like it's made of metal. I added some details to the base and I added some details to the doorway as well. The roof has also been detailed. I also added some details to the walls of the oil house and the windows as well. The chimneys of the oil house have also been re-detailed. I also added some support structures for the roof. Speaking of which, houses are really hard for me to make for this game, surprisingly. I added some more details to the base of the lighthouse as well. I updated the metallic textures so that they'd actually look like they're made of metal. And I added detail to the textures as well. I also made a more detailed lens texture for the daytime animation and for the night animation. At the St. Augustine Lighthouse, the lens rotates 24/7, but the light only comes on at night. You can actually hear the lens rotating when you're inside the lighthouse. I also added smooth shading so that the round objects look like they're actually round, as I mentioned earlier, in case I forgot to mention that. I made the window textures more detailed and I made them more reflective. I also made the lens more reflective too. Now, if you're facing the lens and the sun is shining directly on it, you'll actually see the sunlight reflect the glass of the lens. Now, earlier I was experimenting with light beam textures in order to try and make them transparent at night, but none of the attempts seem to have worked. In fact, this attempt, which is the latest one, the beams aren't even visible because I made them a little too transparent. The game only seems to understand transparent and non-transparent with these glow-in-the-dark textures. And if a glow-in-the-dark texture is transparent, it's not visible. Anyway, here are some updates I made to the lens textures. They're a lot more reflective now. On lighthouses that I make that have multiple animations attached to the same attachment point, you'll sometimes see the light come on briefly when you place it on the ground. This is actually a glitch, but I like it because it lets the person that's using the lighthouse know that it glows in the dark. That's basically me taking advantage of a glitch. Anyway, here's another attempt at making the beams of the light transparent. It probably won't work though because, like I said earlier, the game doesn't like making glow-in-the-dark textures transparent. They're kind of transparent, but still kind of weird. I don't even know how to describe what that is. I just noticed this just now, but it looks like I've solved the problem of why the light beams have shadows, because I've noticed that they're not casting any shadows anymore in this game. So I might have solved the problem. This of course means that I might have to update every single lighthouse I've ever made that casts a beam of light again in order to get rid of the shadows that the light beams were casting. In other words, more work for me.